Dobro. History. Archive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening a case file that really stands as one of the most tragic, and you could argue, the most enduring cold case in the history of modern South Korean culture.
It's a story that's it's haunted the industry for decades.
It really has. We're talking about a career, a whole cultural movement, and a life that was just extinguished at the very moment of its greatest triumph. We're talking about the death of Kim Seung-jae. He was the co-founder of the K-pop duo Do, which was, absolutely seminal.
Foundational, really.
Right. And we're going back to Seoul, November 20, 1995. The setting is this luxurious Swiss Grand Hotel, and that's where 23-year-old Kim Seung-jae was found dead.
And you have to understand, he wasn't just a pop star. He was seen as a revolutionary, a true pioneer.
And just hours, literally hours before he was found, he had delivered this triumphant, incredibly anticipated solo debut performance.
A performance that everyone in the industry believed was the launchpad for a massive, unstoppable solo career.
But the story that first came out, the one that the police and the media ran with, it wasn't murder.
No, not at all. The initial story was, tragic but simple. The official assessment categorized his death as either karoshi, a term some listeners might know.
That by overwork?
Exactly. A sad but, understood reality in these high-pressure industries. Or maybe sudden manhood death syndrome. It gave the press a very quick, very clean, if heartbreaking narrative.
A clean narrative.
Yeah.
That clean narrative, that quick conclusion that this was just a natural, tragic end. It didn't last long, did it?
It barely survived 48 hours.
Right.
Because that assumption was just. It was violently dismantled when the forensic autopsy results were rushed back. The medical examiner was absolutely clear this was not a heart attack brought on by stress.
So what did they find?
The body held this chilling, meticulous secret. 28 distinct needle puncture wounds, all clustered on his right arm. 28. And even more critically, the toxicology reports confirmed the presence of highly specific, professional-grade animal anesthetics in his system. This was forensic evidence that was just screaming homicide.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is a granular reconstruction of what has become known as the first mystery of K-pop. We're going to analyze the forensic data that points so clearly toward a calculated murder. We have to look at the catastrophic, almost unbelievable procedural failures by the police in those first crucial minutes.
Failures that basically doomed the case from the start.
Exactly. And then the cultural and legal maelstrom that followed, which allowed the primary suspect to walk free, turning what really should have been an open and shut case into a permanent, painful cold case.
Right.
To really get at the scale of this tragedy, we can't just talk about Kim Seung-jae, the person. We have to talk about him as a symbol. He represented something completely new in 1995.
That is the absolute key. You have to rewind to the mid-90s in South Korea. The nation was still going through this radical transformation.
Emerging from military dictatorship.
Right, into a democracy. And this political change created this explosive demand among young people for a culture that matched their new, modern, global identity.
And before this moment, say before the early 90s, the music scene was very different.
Oh, completely. It was monolithically dominated by traditional sounds. You're talking about genres like trot and, slow, sentimental ballads.
So for our international listeners, what exactly is trot?
It's a really distinct genre. It's got this repetitive rhythm, very specific vocal inflections, and it's heavily influenced by early 20th century Japanese enka.
So music for an older generation.
It's music rooted in nostalgia, melancholy, Korea's past. And the young people, this so-called X generation, they felt totally disconnected from it. They were craving a voice, a look, a sound that reflected the world they were actually living in.
And that voice arrived in 1992 with Seo Taiji and Boys. They're often called ground zero for modern K-pop.
They cracked the door open, absolutely. But while they started the explosion, it was Do, formed in 1993, that really perfected the aesthetic and refined the sonic template that would define K-pop for the next 30 years.
So who was in Do?
You had Lee Hyun-oh, who was the undisputed musical mastermind, the producer, and then you had Kim Seung-jae, the charismatic frontman, the dancer, the icon.
And they weren't like a manufactured group from a big company.
No, that's what made them so authentic. They were genuinely steeped in Black American music and street culture. They were the ones who truly brought the New Jack Swing sound, that blend of hip-hop, R&B, and intense choreography to the Korean mainstream.
along with the fashion.
Yes, the fashion. And the visual impact of Kim Seung-jae was just immediate and total. He became the avatar of cool. He literally defined a whole new visual language for Korean masculinity.
Let's talk about that look. The details are so iconic.
Absolutely. He just stood out. He was tall, lean, incredibly expressive, and he popularized this style that was so rebellious at the time, oversized American hockey jerseys.
The baggy jean.
Incredibly baggy jeans, pooled around the sneakers, bold bandanas, those futuristic wraparound sunglasses. He wasn't just wearing clothes, he was wearing the uniform of a new, globalized Korea that was rejecting its conservative past.
Their rise was just meteoric.
Yeah.
By 1995, they had 3 huge albums. But then, the pressure of fame, creative differences, they shocked everyone and disbanded.
Right. Lee Hyun-do moved more into pure production, and Kim Seung-jae was determined to prove he could make it on his own. He was preparing his solo leap.
And he took it very seriously.
Oh, completely. His preparation was so deliberate, he spent months abroad, mostly in Los Angeles, just refining his sound.
And that resulted in his solo album, as I told you.
Which was a masterpiece, sophisticated, funky, highly praised. But that period away was also critical for his personal life. It was during that time that the deep fissures in his relationship with his girlfriend, a woman we'll call Miss Kim, really intensified.
And that brings us right to the peak, to the night of November 19th, 1995. He's back in Seoul, and he records his debut stage for the music show SBS Gayo.
And if you watch that footage, it is electric. He is just on another level. He's dressed in this custom gear, executing this incredibly complex choreography. It was the performance of a lifetime.
People who were there said he was just radiating energy.
Yeah, industry peers later testified he was radiant. There was absolutely no sign of the stress or fatigue that the police initially claimed was the cause of death. He was confident, energetic, and just completely focused on the future.
And this is where the evidence becomes deeply personal, and it's the core of what we'd call the psychological autopsy against any theory of suicide. Hours after that incredible performance, while he's winding down at the hotel, he makes a phone call.
He calls his mother. And that call just speaks volumes about his state of mind. He was reportedly jubilant, full of energy, and critically, he was focused entirely on tomorrow.
What did he say to her?
He told his mother he'd performed well and that he was coming home early the next morning.
And there was this one detail that just completely humanizes him, to the detail about what he was looking forward to.
His exact words, as they were reconstructed later, were all about comfort and normalcy. He said, "Mom, I did well. I'll come early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, I'll be able to eat the kimchi and rice you make."
Wow.
And then he said, "Wow, I can't wait to eat it."
That is just, it's utterly devastating. A man planning to take his own life in a luxury hotel suite does not call his mother to make plans for her kimchi and rice the next morning.
No, he was eager to live. He was ready to enjoy the rewards of all his hard work. The idea of him being depressed or suicidal is just categorically refuted by his own words.
So the location, the Swiss Grand Hotel, was just a convenient place for the whole team to crash after the show.
Exactly, after the high of the performance.
And the suite was huge, you said, something like 150 square meters. So there was plenty of space for everyone.
Oh, yeah. It was a big space.
And who exactly was in that celebratory group winding down that night?
It was Kim Seung-jae, his manager, who we'll call Mr. B, 2 American dancers he'd brought over for Korean dancers, and his girlfriend, Mrs. Kim.
And the party atmosphere, it starts to wind down in the early hours of the morning.
Right. Around 2 or 3 a.m., people start heading off to the different rooms within the suite to get some sleep.
And this brings us right to the black box, the critical window of time when the crime must have happened.
Precisely. Most of the team is asleep, and Mrs. Kim is the last person confirmed to have been interacting with Kim Seung-jae in the main living area of the suite.
What happened between them? That's the mystery.
It is. It's locked away. Known only to her and, I guess, what we can infer from the forensic evidence left behind.
And she eventually leaves the hotel before dawn. Her departure time became a huge point of contention later, and it's tied to this almost unbelievable detail.
Yes, she claimed that she did this incredibly odd thing before she left. She said she operated a washing machine in the suite.
A washing machine in the middle of the night.
A washing machine?
Oh.
We'll definitely come back to how the defense used that strange detail later, but for now, the key thing is she was gone before the body was discovered.
And that discovery was made around 6 a.m. by the manager, Mr. B. He finds Kim unresponsive on the sofa. And here, in these crucial first minutes, is where the case just dies before the investigation can even begin.
It is truly shocking. When law enforcement and the first medical examiner arrive, They see the scene through that dominant cultural lens we talked about, celebrity burnout.
They just jump to a conclusion.
Immediately, they jump to the conclusion of natural causes, citing sudden manhood death syndrome or that idea of karoshi, death by overwork.
And this single premature assumption that a young, healthy superstar just had a heart attack is the catastrophic failure that basically guarantees this case will stay unsolved.
Because they didn't treat it as a crime scene.
They did worse than not treating it as a crime scene.
Right. The room wasn't secured. The sanctity of the scene was just utterly violated. Evidence was moved. The suite was cleaned up.
The chain of custody was destroyed.
Completely destroyed. I mean, just think about what was lost in that moment.
What kind of specific evidence are we talking about?
Crucial trace evidence. Fingerprints on the syringe that administered the fatal dose. Maybe skin cells or even blood spatter that would show the dynamics of the injection. Hair and fibers transferred from the perpetrator to the victim.
Anything that could place someone else in that room.
All of it. The police failed to even document the exact position of the body or look for potential drag marks. Everything was compromised because they assumed it was a heart attack and just treated it like a standard sudden death report.
And on top of all that, there are these really troubling, serious allegations of interference at this earliest stage.
Yes, the sources suggest there was a significant push to suppress any kind of forensic investigation. Mrs. Kim reportedly urged the police to just forego a detailed autopsy altogether.
She didn't want one done.
And beyond that, there were these persistent allegations that her family, using their wealth and connections, tried to bribe officials to immediately release the body for cremation.
Wow. So burn the evidence.
The logic is crystal clear. Once the body is cremated, the evidence is gone forever, and the heart attack story becomes the only story.
That sounds like a calculated, immediate attempt to cover up the cause of death before the body itself can talk. It's hard to imagine how a case could ever recover from that level of initial sabotage.
It can't. By the time the National Forensic Service, the NFS, correctly determined that the death was a homicide, the physical scene was useless. They had to rely almost entirely on the body's internal evidence and what they could piece together externally. It was a massive, unnecessary handicap.
So once the NFS gets the body, the internal investigation reveals the true story. The body's testimony becomes the prosecution's entire case, and it starts with those 28 needle puncture wounds.
That number 28 separate fresh injection sites is the central, chilling fact of this entire case. And we have to zoom in on the specific location. They were all concentrated on his right arm.
And this is where we get into what you call the biomechanical paradox. Why is the fact that it was the right arm so crucial in dismantling any theory of accidental death or suicide?
It's a matter of dominance and dexterity. We know for a fact 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 was right-handed. Now, if you are self-injecting, whether it's for drug use or for medication, you have to use your dominant, your dexterous hand to manipulate the syringe precisely. You have to locate the vein. You have to control the plunger.
So a right-handed person injects their left arm?
Always. Virtually without exception. You use your right hand to inject your left arm.
Because trying to inject your own dominant arm would mean using your non-dominant hand, which just doesn't have the fine motor control for something like that, especially not 28 times.
Absolutely. Pathologists found that injecting one's own right arm 28 times with the left hand is physically incredibly difficult and just fundamentally improbable, especially for someone with no history of being a chronic drug user. This fact alone screams administration by a third party.
And there's another key physical detail: the lack of a struggle. If someone is injecting him 28 times against his will, where are the defensive wounds?
Their absence is critical. It implies one of two possibilities. Either he was completely compliant, maybe he was tricked into thinking he was getting a benign medical treatment, or he was incapacitated. And this is where the toxicology report provides the chemical confirmation for how that was achieved.
Let's talk about this calculated animal cocktail they found in his system.
Yeah.
Because this was not, typical street narcotics.
Not even close. This shows a high degree of medical or veterinary knowledge. The first substance they identified was Zoletil.
Zoletil. What is that? It doesn't sound like something you can just buy over the counter.
No, it's a powerful regulated veterinary anesthetic. It's a proprietary mix of tilletamine and zolazepam. It's primarily used for immobilizing large animals.
Like what kind of animals?
Think dogs, bears, large cats in a zoo. It's a dissociative anesthetic. It's in the same class as ketamine, but it's formulated for very robust veterinary use.
And what happens if you give it to a human?
In a human, it acts as a rapid, profound chemical restraint. It would cause intense sedation, muscle paralysis, and critically deep amnesia. A victim chemically restrained with Zoletil would be completely helpless, unable to fight back, unable to even form clear memories of what was happening.
Which perfectly explains the absence of defensive wounds. The killer chemically tied him down.
It's a chilling parallel to the duct tape incident we're going to discuss later.
So Zoletil was the disabling agent. What was the secondary agent, the one that was actually lethal?
That was magnesium sulfate. Now, it has legitimate medical uses for things like severe asthma or preeclampsia, but it is incredibly dangerous because it has a very narrow therapeutic window.
And in an overdose context, what does it do?
A high dose causes a condition called hypermagnesemia. This leads to a cascade failure in the body, loss of deep tendon reflexes, severe respiratory depression, and then ultimately cardiac arrest.
And there it is. That's the calculated intent. You combine Zoletil to subdue the victim so there's no struggle, and magnesium sulfate to induce a fatal cardiac arrest. You have manufactured a death that is designed to look exactly like a sudden natural heart attack.
It was a sophisticated, highly knowledgeable execution designed to perfectly exploit that initial police assumption of 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄.
So once the media gets wind of the needle marks, the defense, of course, tries to float the theory that 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄 was a secret drug addict who accidentally overdosed.
A predictable but weak defense.
How did the forensic team just absolutely crush that argument?
The forensics provided 3 absolute counterpoints. First, the visual evidence on the body. The medical examiner found 0 track marks.
Meaning no signs of long-term use.
Exactly. No scarring, no collapsed veins, none of the telltale signs you see with chronic, long-term IV drug users. All 28 of those marks were acutely fresh injuries.
Second, the chemical history. You can hide acute drug use, but chronic use leaves a record in your body.
Right. And they did a hair follicle analysis, which can show a history of drug use going back several months. It came back completely clean for all common narcotics, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine. He was clean.
And the final point, which is maybe the most obvious, the nature of the drugs themselves.
These substances, an animal tranquilizer and a mineral supplement, are just not what someone uses for a recreational high. And everyone, his family, his friends, testified he was intensely health conscious. The conclusion was undeniable. He was not a victim of his own addiction, he was a victim of a calculated poisoning.
With the death now firmly established as a homicide, and given that there was no forced entry into that hotel suite, the investigation logically pivots.
It focuses on the only person known to have been alone with him during that critical window, Mrs. Kim, his girlfriend.
And her profile immediately checks the box for means. She had the specific, medically precise knowledge needed for this kind of crime.
She did. Mrs. Kim was a student at a prestigious medical or dental school. So this meant she possessed the critical knowledge of how to administer bead injections. And, crucially, she had the access or the connections to get her hands on specific restricted pharmaceuticals like powerful anesthetics.
Things you can't just walk in and buy.
Exactly. And we can't ignore the other contextual factor. She came from a very wealthy family with reported significant political connections.
And that detail is critical because many people believe it's what allowed her to afford the kind of high-powered legal defense that could dismantle a case like this, no matter how strong the evidence seemed.
Right.
But let's look at the motive. The investigation uncovered this horrifying pattern of behavior. The sources paint a deeply disturbing picture of a toxic, possessive, and volatile relationship.
It is a textbook case of coercive control, escalating violence, and stalking that's all rooted in a deep fear of abandonment. The witness testimonies from 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄's friends and team during the trial provided these concrete, horrifying examples of her control.
And the first incident they documented is probably the most shocking. The gas gun shooting.
Yeah. Mr. Kim allegedly shot 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄 in the face with a gas gun, a non-lethal deterrent-type pistol. She tried to play it off as an accident, that she was just testing it.
But his friends who saw it were horrified.
Of course. It's a chilling escalation that suggests she was already, on some level, desensitized to physically harming him.
And that desire for control escalated even further into actual physical restraint, which eerily mirrors the chemical restraint that was used in the murder.
The duct tape incident. She reportedly tied him to his bed with duct tape to stop him from leaving, to prevent him from going to sign a crucial music contract or to attend a promotional event. I mean, this was not a simple lover's spat. This was overt physical imprisonment and an attempt to actively sabotage his career just to keep him close to her.
And the surveillance was relentless. This is what we would now retroactively call proto-saucing behavior.
Exactly. For listeners who don't know, a saucing is an abusive, obsessive fan who engages in extreme stalking and invasion of an idol's privacy. And Miss Kim was exhibiting these exact traits, but against her own partner.
How extreme was it?
She would call him incessantly, sometimes up to 60 times a day. She'd call his friends to verify where he was, and she would just show up unannounced at his professional schedules. There were no boundaries. It was just total obsession.
So the motive starts to crystallize. Kim had tried to break up with her before he left for the U.S. His huge solo success meant he was finally achieving a level of independence and fame that would permanently sever her control over him.
It's abandonment annihilation. That's a psychological term. If he was truly escaping her control through his fame, then the only way to retain that control was to remove him permanently. The murder was the ultimate act of possessive control.
And all of this circumstantial evidence suddenly converged with a smoking gun, the purchase of the exact poisons.
The police did some brilliant investigative legwork here. They canvassed all the veterinary clinics and pharmacies near her home in 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏, and eventually a pharmacist at a local animal hospital identified Mrs. Kim.
And he confirmed she bought this specific exotic cocktail found in the victim's body.
He did. The pharmacist confirmed that she purchased Zoletil 50, the specific formulation found in his system, along with 2 syringes and the critical magnesium sulfate. And she bought it all in early November, shortly before the murder. This wasn't a coincidence. This was preparation.
And her lies started immediately, beginning with the cover story she gave the pharmacist.
Right. She claimed she needed the veterinary anesthetic and the syringes to euthanize her pet dog.
But the dog was fine.
Police later confirmed her dog was alive and perfectly healthy. And on top of that lie, the pharmacist testified that she explicitly asked him not to tell anyone about the purchase. That demand for secrecy is highly incriminating.
But the most damning detail is the visit she allegedly made after the murder.
Yes. Reports suggest she actually went back to the animal hospital around December 1st, after Kim's death was public, and asked the pharmacist a hugely suspicious question.
What did she ask?
She asked if the drugs she had purchased would show up in an autopsy. Or, in another version of the story, she just reminded him again to keep the transaction a secret. Either way, it links her directly to the murder weapon and shows an awareness of the forensic investigation to come.
So based on all of this, motive, means, opportunity, and the purchase, the prosecution had what looked like an absolutely ironclad case.
The trial immediately captivated the entire nation. It was a cultural flashpoint. You had a beloved icon's tragic end pitted against this powerful defense team, and it really highlighted the friction between Korea's developing forensic science and its old, confession-based judicial system.
And the prosecution's narrative in that first trial at the Seoul District Court, it was simple and convincing.
Yeah, they argued she manipulated his trust, that she maybe offered him a benign fatigue recovery shot, which was a common thing for celebrities to get back then.
Right.
And then, under that guise, she administered the lethal chemical cocktail.
And the initial court bought it completely.
They did. They found the evidence overwhelming. The volatile relationship, the purchase of the exact poisons, the lies about the dog, that right-handed paradox that ruled out suicide. She was convicted of murder and initially sentenced to death.
The death sentence.
Which was later commuted to life imprisonment. But for a moment, it looked like justice was served.
But then came the appeal. And this is where the resources and the sophistication of her defense team really changed everything.
They didn't have to prove she was innocent. They just had to create reasonable doubt by tearing at the technical seams of the prosecution's case.
And they did it brilliantly, starting with their most devastating move, targeting the SAR witness.
The pharmacist, the man who positively identified her as the one who bought the poison.
He was pivotal.
Absolutely. And during the appeal, the pharmacist suddenly and very conveniently experienced what the public immediately saw as amnesia. He dramatically retracted his certainty on the stand. He testified that he could not remember clearly if Miss Kim was the person who bought the drugs or if the dates he'd given were precise. He just backed away from his entire testimony.
And without that concrete link between Mrs. Kim and the murder weapons, the prosecution's case is suddenly much weaker.
It's severely weakened. They're left with just circumstantial evidence, and suspicions of witness tampering, of financial pressure, or outright bribery just flooded the public conversation, but nothing was ever proven.
But the damage was done.
Regardless of the reason, the defense had just decapitated the prosecution's single most concrete piece of evidence.
And next, they went on a technical assault against the forensics itself with the lethal dose defense.
Right. They seized on the exact amount of Zoletil she had purchased. The defense team brought in their own experts who argued that a single bottle of Zoletil 50 contained an insufficient amount of the active agents to actually kill a healthy adult male of 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏's size.
But the prosecution knew that it was the synergy of the two drugs together that was the fatal mechanism.
They did, but they failed to adequately counter this technical point in a way that satisfied the appellate court. The defense very cleverly managed to center the argument only on the tranquilizer's dose, creating just enough technical doubt about the actual mechanism of death.
Get rid of an ambiguity.
Exactly. Was that dose truly what killed him? If not, did someone else come in and inject a second dose? They just clouded the entire issue.
And then came the most bizarre part of the entire trial, the washing machine alibi.
This is a true spectacle of legal technicality. Mrs. Kim's defense took her initial strange claim that she ran a load of laundry in the suite before she left the hotel. And they brought in experts to testify about the specific cycle time of industrial-grade hotel washing machines.
Wait. They successfully argued that a laundry cycle could prove she was absent during the time of the murder.
They did. They argued that the machine's cycle time, combined with her departure time, proved she had to have left the room before the estimated time of death.
Which was based on rigor mortis, which is notoriously imprecise.
Exactly. But the appellate court, which seemed to be looking for any straw to grasp for reasonable doubt, accepted this minor timeline discrepancy, a discrepancy based on a totally unrelated, bizarre activity, as being enough to suggest a third party could have slipped into the room after she left.
And that third party theory was the final nail in the coffin.
Correct. The defense just muddied the waters. They suggested jealous backup dancers or a vengeful, anonymous saucing fan.
Even though there was zero evidence.
Zero evidence to support any of those claims, and the medical precision of the crime contradicted them. But because the initial police work was so flawed, because they failed to secure the scene, the prosecution couldn't absolutely 100% exclude the possibility of a random, medically skilled killer slipping past everyone.
And that was the standard for acquittal.
That was the standard for reasonable doubt. The appellate court overturned the conviction. The Supreme Court upheld the acquittal. Mrs. Kim was free.
Then the legal door just slammed shut.
Completely. Because of the principle of ne bis in idem, or double jeopardy, she cannot be retried for this crime. It doesn't matter what new evidence might come to light. And on top of that, the statute of limitations for murder back in 1995 was only 15 years, so that window has long since closed. The acquittal is a permanent legal barrier.
The legal file may have closed, but public outcry never stopped. For 2 decades, this case was held up as the perfect example of justice failing because of wealth and influence.
It was a deep, open wound in the public consciousness.
And then, in 2019, that wound was ripped open again with a potential breakthrough.
Right. That's when SBS's flagship investigative program, Unanswered Questions, announced they were doing a special deep dive into the case. And they claimed they had gathered significant new evidence using modern forensic technology that didn't even exist in 1995.
The public anticipation must have been off the charts. What breakthroughs did they claim to have?
They reportedly consulted over 50 different experts. They were trying to build a case that would, satisfy modern investigative journalism, if not the courts. And the key rumored breakthrough involved new forensic imaging.
So how would modern imaging change the analysis of those 28 needle sites 25 years later?
Well, back in 1995, they could observe the puncture marks. But today, modern forensic imaging allows for a microscopic analysis of the tissue damage, the precise depth, the angle of the injections.
I see.
And this new analysis allegedly strengthened that incapacitation theory. It confirmed the injection trajectory was consistent with a subject who was perfectly still, ruling out any significant movement or any possibility of self-infliction. It reinforced the idea that he was chemically restrained before the fatal doses were given.
They also addressed that big weakness in the original trial, the whole lethal dose defense?
Yes. They reportedly gathered new pharmacokinetic data on Zoletil toxicity, which effectively refuted the defense's 1995 claim that the dose wasn't sufficient. Modern science could demonstrate with much higher certainty that the calculated synergy with the magnesium sulfate would undoubtedly be fatal.
So the production team was ready to air the most definitive account of this crime ever put together. And that's when the legal system intervened again.
Mrs. Kim, who was reportedly now working as a dentist under a new name, immediately filed an injunction in civil court to block the broadcast.
What was her legal argument for stopping a journalistic investigation into an unsolved public murder?
Her core argument was that her right to privacy and her reputation as an acquitted private citizen, a finding upheld by the Supreme Court, outweighed the public's right to know about a historical crime. She argued the media coverage would cause irreparable damage and defamation, regardless of any new evidence.
And in a move that sparked massive public outrage, the judge sided with her.
It was a shocking ruling. The court essentially said that because the legal process had cleared her, the finality of that judicial acquittal meant that her individual personal rights took precedence over freedom of the press and the public's desire for information. The episode was banned literally hours before it was scheduled to air.
They tried to fight back, right? They re-edited the show to focus less on Mrs. Kim and more on the pure forensic mystery.
They did, but she sued again and successfully blocked the second attempt as well. So to this day, the raw interviews, the investigative tapes, the modern forensic data, it all sits sealed and inaccessible in the SBS archives.
The silence is being enforced by the judiciary.
Yes. The producer's own public comments showed this deep frustration. He said the court was essentially denying the public's right to information. The silence surrounding the truth of this case continues to be enforced by the system itself.
So when you lay it all out, the motive, the means, the drug purchase, the toxic relationship, the compelling forensic data, you have to ask again, why did justice fail so completely in 1995?
It was a confluence of historical failures and, legal rigidity. It really was the perfect storm. And we have to start, again, with the crime scene integrity. That immediate failure to seal the hotel room just destroyed any chance of getting conclusive physical evidence like fingerprints on a syringe or trace DNA.
And that failure comes directly from the prevailing culture of policing in South Korea at that time.
Absolutely. Korean policing in the 90s was heavily rooted in what they called confession culture. They were very skilled at getting admissions of guilt, but they were much less experienced in building and defending a high-stakes, purely circumstantial case that was based on complex forensic science.
So when Ms. Kim didn't confess,
and her family could afford the highest-tier defense team, the prosecution just lacked the experience to bridge the technical gaps that were created by that poor initial police work.
and that structural weakness was then just brutally exploited by the wealth and influence factor, which is still the consistent public theory for why she was acquitted.
It's undeniable. The defense team she had, backed by that significant financial power, was able to technically dissect every single weakness and imprecision in the prosecution's case. They introduced technical doubt on the lethal dose. They manufactured doubt with that ridiculous washing machine alibi.
And they secured the total collapse of the star witness.
Right. And the pharmacist's sudden, convenient memory loss is still seen by the public as the smoking gun regarding that perceived influence.
It's the most suspicious part of the whole trial.
It is. In the court of public opinion, that retraction is not seen as an honest failure of memory. It's seen as the clearest sign that the system bent under external pressure and derailed the entire case, despite all the overwhelming circumstances.
Let's turn back for a moment to the psychology of the crime itself. If we accept the prosecution's theory, what does the duality of the method, the frenzy versus the control, tell us about the perpetrator?
It's what criminologists call the overkill paradox. On one hand, you have the emotional component, 28 frenzied injection sites. That suggests rage, possession, a desire to repeatedly mark the victim's body. It speaks to extreme emotional volatility.
But that's immediately contrasted with the highly controlled choice of weapons.
Exactly. The rage is contained by this cold, calculated control. The choice of Zoletil and Magnesium sulfate, potent, precise, and designed to look natural, suggests a premeditated calculation. The perpetrator wanted to express their rage by marking him 28 times, but they also wanted to ensure total control over the ultimate narrative, that he died of natural causes. This duality perfectly reflects her known behavior.
Obsessive violent control followed by measured manipulation. But despite all these complexities, the core physical evidence is still the most heartbreaking part. The fact that the injections were on his right arm, which rules out suicide and accidental use.
It forces the conclusion that someone else administered the drugs, and the fact that he had no defensive wounds leads to the single most tragic insight into this crime: the breach of trust.
The idea that he trusted the person holding the needle.
He was a superstar at the peak of his physical fitness. He was more than capable of fighting back. The prosecution's theory that he believed he was getting a benign vitamin shot or a fatigue recovery shot is the only narrative that fits the physical evidence. He died, not fighting for his life, but under the tragic deception of trust, just as his greatest dreams were coming true.
30 years later, Kim Sung-jae's death is K-pop's original sin. It's this grim, foundational myth for an industry that's now valued in the billions globally.
But his influence didn't just survive, it became fundamental to the entire aesthetic.
His visual legacy is completely immortalized. You see it constantly. Every time a major group, whether it's BTS or NCT, wears oversized hockey jerseys or baggy silhouettes or uses that complex street-influenced choreography, they are participating in the visual language that Do, and Kim Sung-jae specifically, pioneered.
And his music, especially this sophisticated funk of As I Told You, remains a cornerstone. It's covered all the time by contemporary idols who want to show off their vocal and performance charisma. It's become a standard that demands perfection.
And there's that haunting, almost beautiful coda to the story involving his former partner, Lee Hun-do.
Yes. Recently, Lee Hun-do used modern AI voice technology to restore and sample Kim Sung-jae's voice for a new track called Rise. It was this deeply emotional project that essentially allowed the duo to perform together again across the vast divide of death. It gave Kim Sung-jae one last digital encore.
But despite that artistic immortality, the Kim Sung-jae case remains a permanent scar.
It is a dark reminder of the intense vulnerability of idols to unchecked obsession, the immense pressure of fame, and the ultimate failure of institutions, from the police in 1995 to the courts in 2019, to protect the victim and deliver justice.
The acquittal closed the legal file on Mrs. Kim, enforced by the rigidity of double jeopardy.
But the court of public history remains firmly in session, demanding answers that the legal system refuses to provide.
And that takes us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. The image of a rising star, injected 28 times on the very night his dreams came true, is a horrific foundational myth for the K-pop industry. If those SBS investigation tapes were finally unbanned by a higher court and all that modern forensic data were released to the public, how much faith would you truly put in a legal system that already failed once? What responsibility does the public have to push back against judicial secrecy and legal finality when the overwhelming circumstantial and forensic facts all suggest a profound failure of justice?